Today is Saturday, September 23rd, and this is your farm garden tour. For those of you who've been watching weekly religiously, you noticed that there has not been a video for the last 2 weeks. Troy and I went on a weeks-long vacation, which encompassed 2 weekends, to Jamaica with our friends Dan and Nikki Hyatt. And as a result, we have not been to the farm for those 2 weeks. So it was kind of exciting to get out here and see what everything looked like, and also a little disappointing because we are at the end of the season. So things are drying up and going away. It's pretty much cleanup time. There's some more harvest to do, but for the most part, it's pick the last things that are out here and potentially start pulling the plants and then start prepping for next year's garden. But before we get into all of that, I'll give you a quick tour. It's about 60 degrees here today and misting, so I'm out in a blaze orange raincoat. You're not going to lose me here in the garden. But yeah, a little cool. Looking at the forecast for the next week for this area, the highs are going to be in the upper 60s, low 70s, and the overnight lows are in the mid 50s. The week after that, we're looking at highs in the high 50s to 60s, and then overnight lows look like they're going to be in the 40s. So there's some things that we're still, hopefully going to have some time to be able to leave out here in the garden. Potatoes being one of those. The potatoes, for the most part, are all pretty much dead. These are the Nakotas. There's still a little bit of green on them, but with as wet as the ground is right now, because they've had a decent amount of rain recently, and it's continuing to rain now, as long as it does not look like they're rotting in the ground, and I'll do a couple of test hills to check that on the ones that look really dead, we're just going to leave them in the ground. It's the best way to store them because you need to keep them cool and in a dark place for the most part in order to stretch them out as long as possible in their fresh form. We have canned a number of potatoes thus far, and we'll probably do some more of that. Maybe shred some, maybe slice some and freeze them. We'll see. It's all about making sure that you're making use of all that you can and not letting anything go to waste. Speaking of which, the beans, they're pretty much done. There are some out here, late in the fall. They don't look as good as they do in the early spring when they're just getting going. But there's a good number of them that are just too big to eat at this point. So we'll need to decide, are we just going to leave them out here on the vine, let them dry, and then harvest some for seed for next year? We'll see. We're still having conversations about what we want to plant next year as far as varieties of beans and how we want to plant them. With the troubles that we had with potato bugs this year, one of the companion planting recommendations was that you put your green beans really close to your potatoes. This was not close enough. So what we're thinking about doing is doing a bush variety of beans that literally is intermixed between the potatoes to see if that helps. Keep away some of the potato bugs. We're also talking about moving potatoes to other areas of the garden. That's all still very much up in the air. Joel came through and picked what was left of the snow pea pods. Duke is still finding some. Duke likes snow peas. So anyway, we'll let him have a snack there. I'd rather have him eating that than deer and rabbit poop, I suppose. But let's just walk through here. These are the shell peas. They are completely dead, those plants. We'll pull them. I mean, it's not an attractive look right now to have these things out here just dead like they are, but there are other live things that need to be harvested and taken care of, and we can just pull these whenever we get to it. Here is the kidney beans, and they're nice and dry. I'm going to take a look at those and potentially pick those so that we can shell them and complete the drying process on them and put those up for the fall and winter. There's another volunteer tomato plant I never noticed. Very interesting. Over here, these are the big purple. You can see that they're really starting to dry out on the vine here. We've showed you a couple times in previous videos what those beans look like. But now that they're leathery and dry, let me see if I can't pop this open and show you what they look like. Hang on here. I am solo in the garden today. Troy's not feeling great, but we'll get him all healed up and have him help with some of the harvest stuff in weeks to come. So yeah, those are the big purple beans. Aren't they cool looking? No idea what we're going to do with these, but we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll shell some of these dried ones. Duke, you want to try? Shell some of these dried ones, try and cook them in something like a bean soup. I have no idea what they're going to taste like, but we'll give it a shot. And look at those silly things are still blossoming and putting on more beans. Here's pintos. These guys are going to come off too, and we'll sit down and shell those, let them finish their drying process. And as we walk around over here, before we went on our vacation, we dug most of these potatoes because their foliage was already dead. There's just a couple of mounds left in this row. I think these will be my test subjects. I'll dig these up and see what they look like underneath, and that'll help me determine what I'm going to do with the rest of them. One best practice is, especially when the soil is wet like this, you dig them up, spread them out on the ground, somewhere indoors preferably, on a piece of cardboard, and let them dry. We do that because when they come out of the ground, their skins are really soft. And if you let them sit out and kind of dry, exposed to the air, that hardens up the exterior peel on the potato and helps it keep nicer. The other thing we noticed is we have gophers in the garden. It looks like they're making some pretty big piles. Duke was already over here. You can see his footprints in there, kind of sniffing around and seeing what he could see. These are typically striped gophers or striped gophers. We've always called them striped. I don't know if that's correct use of the word or not. But I'll show you a picture of what they look like here in a minute. They get underground, tunnel, push up big humps like this. The farmer that rents the field for hay, he actually pays a trapper to come out and get those things out of the field. Excuse me. Because they can be destructive. They eat the roots underground, and I have a feeling that's what they're doing over here. Is some of these carrots are probably, unfortunately, nibbled on by the striped gopher, who's been pushing up dirt here in the garden. So much for no-till. Anyway, we pulled a couple carrots to see what's going on underneath the ground. Here's a purple carrot. We've got a lot of these things that ended up looking leggy, and having multiple root shoots off of them. Doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the variety that did that. And we're going to have to, I think a big part of it was the thinning. So when we came through and weeded, we thinned, we stuck some back in the ground that came up as a result of weeding. But there was still a good number of them that, the shoots were right on top of each other. So I think that's what happened to a bunch of these, is they were multiple sprouts just kind of fused together and made very interesting looking carrots. But here's something I've never seen before, and I want to double check because there are some faux carrot looking weeds and plants that can go to flower like this. But excuse me, I was reading about carrots going to seed, And usually they say that you plant your carrots, you leave it in the ground, let it overwinter, and then the next year they'll go to seed and you can harvest the seed. Well, that appears to be what happened with this carrot, is that in its first year, it just plain and simply went to seed. There's a little ladybug in there. Let's see what that develops into. And then there's some scary looking wasp dude hanging out on there as well. So I'm not going to play with the plant too much, but it's going to be interesting. I'm going to do a little research on that, find out if that in fact is a carrot that went to seed, and if so, at what point do we harvest seed from it? So that might be fun. Here's another decent looking carrot. These guys, again, because of the weather forecast for the next couple of weeks, the longer they stay in the ground, the better. It helps keep them nicely protected. Oh, good grief. I'm gonna have to come back with a spade because that guy is so big that I can't get him out. Oh, maybe I'll just sit here and see what I can do because I'm stubborn, and we'll see what I can do to get it out of the ground. Mom's coming to visit me here. We will, yeah, I'll come back with the tool and we'll dig that one out. So, tomatoes, what we have here for tomatoes, the vines are dying back pretty significantly. It's gonna be, just pick what's ripe. Anything that's got really dead foliage, I will likely pull all the green tomatoes off of those as well, and we'll let them ripen off of the plant. There is the trellis with our morning glories on it in all its glory. So it's doing beautiful things. Here's a carrot that I pulled earlier. That's really nice. Decent looking carrot. And then another wacky one that has been nibbled on the top. That could be a mouse. That could be a gopher. That could be a rabbit. Who knows? Could be a duke. But I have a feeling he would have done a better job of chewing on it. There she is. The morning glory trellis. So these self-seed, or they can self-seed. And here is kind of a cluster of what turns into seeds. I've got hundreds of these in here. Here's them in their green form. As they turn brown, and I'm going to harvest some of these later today. As they turn brown, I don't know if you can see that, they crack open, and that's where you find the seeds. And this is really tough to do when you're alone. Right in between right there on my ring finger is one of the seeds. So I might have created something I didn't want here, and that we might have morning glory here in the garden forever, whether I wanted them or not, because those little seed pods will pop open and those guys will take root and grow next year. But I'm not going to worry about it. Joel, potato. Excuse me. All right, here's what's left of the spaghetti squash. The ones that turned kind of the yellowish color, as you would expect a spaghetti squash to look like, those all got picked 2 weeks ago. These are the ones that had the green, and they're turning yellow, slightly different yellow, but we'll see what happens there. The vines have really super duper died back. The orange pumpkins, for the most part, anywhere that their vines are completely dead, like over in that area, I'll probably pull those all out of the garden today. The honeyboat delicatas, their vines are completely dead, so we'll start pulling those. And the ground cherries. Excuse me. Ground cherries are insane. Have to probably just pull the plants and then scoop up everything that's underneath them because I think they're pretty much done. These are the ground peaches. Not really a fan. Probably will not do those again next year. Jalapenos. These haven't been picked in a couple of weeks. So a lot of them are turning kind of that ripened black color, which is fine. Good looking jalapenos. It took forever for these things to come on. And they're pretty mild. I read somewhere that if you have, if you intentionally stress a jalapeno plant, like deprive it of water and such, that they get hot. So maybe we'll explore that next year. These are the Thai chilies. They're still coming on like mad. There's a few of them that are starting to turn red. I guess I think they get milder when they turn red, but I'm not 100%. I have to go through and do some research on that. The watermelons. I think in our last video, we talked about the weird crop circly things that were on the watermelons. It's a virus. Who knew? Well, a lot of people online knew, but I didn't know. So it wasn't that big of a deal, really, and it did not affect the flavor or the texture of the melons. Here's one that's got it on there. So goofy looking. But it didn't impact the flavor. Those watermelons are really good. We've been cutting them and eating them constantly. Bitter melon, these guys suffered a little bit. I think they're being attacked by either birds or insects. This is still hard, but you can tell that something has been after it. Actually, that part doesn't look so great. For as long as we waited for these to come on, here they are, finally, as the weather is really beginning to cool off. You can kind of see there on the back end of the field, trees are starting to change color. The maples especially. That one right there is going to be gorgeous in a week or so. Tamaracks down there don't tend to change to their yellow until probably sometime in mid-October. So we'll show you pics of that. More bitter melon. Look at them. So neat. And the cucamelons. There are more cucamelons. Oops, I just stepped on a bitter melon. There are more cucamelons on these vines right now than there is foliage, it seems. So I have to get in there and pick those guys off. Duke is eating another cucumber. What a kid. The tomatillos. I'm just gonna have to get in here and pick up the plant and find everything that's underneath. They're so loaded down and heavy, I can't even really see where the fruit's at. Here's one. There's a good sized one. It's a little yellowish, so it's a little past its peak, but it's still a decent tomatillo. The white butterflies and their larvae have completely decimated the Brussels sprouts. So we'll see if there's anything that we can salvage out of those. Here's another shot of the honeyboat delicatas. It'll be really interesting to see how many are truly out there when we start picking them up and putting them in a wagon. Yeah. So that's about it. Here's pumpkin. Oh, here's one of our last patty pan squashes. We left this probably 4 or 6 weeks ago just to see how big it would get. Turned a gorgeous orangish color. Still solid, still viable to eat, but... And look, these guys, of anything that's produced in this garden, these things were the most insane. They just kept going and kept going, and they're still going, for Pete's sake. Look at that. Crazy. And then our bluish pumpkins. I don't know if that one is turning a different color or if it's a bad one, but the rest of them are kind of this whitish blue color. Since they still have green foliage, we'll leave them out here for a bit longer. But that's it. I'll take a quick video again once we've harvested. This is first look. Haven't done anything yet since we were up here 3 weeks ago. So we'll do a harvest and show you what we get. Today is Sunday, September 24th. And I know I said I was going to get you a harvest update yesterday. It rained yesterday afternoon, kind of chased me out of the garden. So I finished the harvest this morning and figured I'd show you what it was. These orange pumpkins, we counted 41 of them. Most of them appear to be ripe. So I pulled them out because I don't want them to sit and rot or be subject to any critters maybe getting after them. Honeyboat delicata, that's the talk of the town. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3 of these trays full of delicata. Milk crate, milk crate. There's another milk crate under there, and then those on top. We did take some and roast some this morning, so I've got probably 6 cups of squash that can be put up and frozen or eaten for dinner. We'll see what happens. Those are Thai chilies, the teeny tiny ones, and jalapenos in that bucket. And then our tomatoes. We've got a couple of trays of tomatoes. The green ones are on top, the more ripe ones below that. And then this mess here is ground cherries. I'm going to turn the radio back on here in a minute, listen to the Vikings game. Mom's got a pot of beef and barley soup on the stove, and Dad and I are gonna sit here and pick through the ground cherries. So that is the harvest for this weekend. The blue pumpkins that are out there aren't quite ready yet. There's much like the watermelons, there's a little curlicue, and the curlicue nearest the pumpkin, if that is dry and dead looking, that's supposed to be an indication that the pumpkins are ready to go. That's the case for all of these. The blue ones, we harvested one this morning. It was the only one I found that had the curlicue dead and dry, and it's in the oven right now. So we will see what kind of flesh that produces. It should be pretty tasty. It was very dark orange. It smelled wonderful. So that is the harvest for this weekend. Until next time, take care.